Talking with Gigi Engle. She is an award-winning feminist author, certified sex educator, and psychotherapist in training. As a sex expert with lifestyle condoms, she promotes and teaches about pleasure-based sex education, masturbation, and safer sex practices. Gigi, welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So I guess I would like to start by asking you, how would you describe yourself to the audience, maybe for someone who is not familiar with your work?
I am a certified sex educator and a writer. I am an author of the book, All the Fucking Mistakes, and I am a psychotherapist in training. So a lot of different things. Okay. As a writer, I'm a journalist and I focus on sexual wellness.
One of the many things you talk about is, and you have written about this, is how similar the penis and the clitoris are. And then I'd like to know, how have you found, or if you have found, that exposing that information changes people's views of their genitals and their sex life in general?
I think, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that there isn't enough lip service that's given to the clitoris in any capacity. And, lots of people still think the clitoris doesn't even exist. Like, people still think it's a myth. Fewer people now, luckily, but it's still out there. That's still a pretty common one. And like there's also myths around that female orgasms are difficult to give, or clitoris owners, it's harder to give them orgasms because like their anatomy is so complicated. So what I wanted to do when I wrote that article was to show that actually we all start the same in utero. You start from a clitoris, like the blueprint is a clitoris. And then the clitoris, then when you have a Y chromosome, then develops into the penis and the scrotum and all the rest of the male genital area. And then the female sexual organs grow internally, and they all have a corresponding part. If you look at it anatomically, and they are all made from erectile tissue, and they all get engorged in the same way. The only real difference is that, they look different, obviously, and they're different. They're different sizes, even though the full structure of the clitoris is about the size of the average male penis. It's about 5 inches. And the only real difference is that the urethra goes through the penis, and you also ejaculate through the penis, and you don't through the clitoris. And so that's basically what the only real difference. And it's not hard. And my goal with that was to show people that no, the clitoris is not that difficult to figure out. Yes, orgasms are totally possible. And the only reason we have done that is because we have a crazy patriarchal society that prioritizes male pleasure over female pleasure. And we don't have any good sex education.
But have you found that this information has been useful during coaching sessions? Do you think people, in their everyday lives, are they absorbing this information in a way that is helpful to them? Is it allowing to change that narrative?
I mean, it definitely helps. It helps a lot. A lot of what I do, both practicing sex therapy and doing clinical coaching, is psychoeducating about people's bodies. And a lot of the people who come to me who own a clitoris, a lot of the time they've never even looked at their own vulva. And so a lot of what I do is teaching people about their anatomy, because there's so much shame around our genitals, and there's so much shame associated with the vulva. If you even just there's so many messed up things, all the disgusting terminology we use as nicknames, meat curtains and all that, just horrible stuff. It just does not bring pleasant stuff to mind. And so people with clitorises have a lot of shame around their vulvas and around their clitorises. And as a result, it can manifest in all kinds of sexual health and sexuality problems, like low desire, lack of orgasm, pain during sex. It can all be a lot of it is rooted in shame. And so the more you can psychoeducate someone about their body, the more empowered they can feel about it. Because if you don't really know anything about your anatomy, it's hard to connect your mind and body. Hard to connect yourself to your genitals if you think they're weird or don't know what they do or anything like that.
And then what do you think are the benefits? What are the main things that change when you start to connect those things, to connect your mind and your body, and to understand your body a little bit better?
Well, a lot of stuff changes. First of all, your overall self-esteem improves, because you start to feel more connected to your body, feeling better about yourself, better self-positive self-imaging. Experiencing orgasm becomes easier, because the more you know your body, the more you know what brings it pleasure, and the more you can connect with it. And then also it's like having a strong connection to your body is essential in having orgasms and essential in experiencing pleasure. Because if you're worked up and or you're stressed out or you're feeling shame, it's like almost impossible to become sexually aroused, because your brain turns off the messaging that is going to your body that says, oh yes, it's sexy time, and like I'm turned on. It will cut that messaging off, and it's basically going to be impossible to orgasm.
How often do you find that? Because it seems to be common that people think that pain during sex is normal, especially
yeah, it's very
female.
common. And yes, because that's all links back to this like lack of sex education, because like we don't have any information about the clitoris, which means that if you don't have information, like kind of all sort of like which came first. It's like if you don't have sex education, you can't learn about, if you don't have sex education, you don't hear about the clitoris. If you don't hear about the clitoris, when you're experimenting sexually or you're having sex and all you heard about was intercourse, there's not going to be any foreplay, or there's not going to be sufficient foreplay. You're not going to be sexually aroused. And we don't know about, like, nobody says anything about lube. So you end up just trying to penetrate a person. You're end up getting penetrated when you're dry and tensed up because you're scared. Of course it's going to hurt. But that's not normal. It's not normal for sex to hurt at all. And it's completely avoidable. And a lot of people would experience a lot less distress if we just taught people about their bodies and stopped acting like sex isn't a part of the human experience. Because sex is as integral a part to the human experience as eating or sleeping. It's not this shame-filled thing that we need to be so stressed out about. The only reason that we think sex is shameful is because humans decided it was shameful. It's not inherently bad. It's a part of being a person.
You're absolutely right there. And this brings a question to mind, which is, how do you think we could, because this is true, right? And then all beings are or will be sexual beings at some point. How do you think that, do you have any thoughts on how these things can be more normalized and better taught, like since an early age?
Yes. I mean, I think there's age appropriate sex education from the time kids are like 5. Like if you start with, like, you look at, for example, you look at the way that the Netherlands handle sex education, and they start with conversations in kindergarten and preschool about consent and about like, teaching kids that, you don't touch another person without asking permission. And like, you're not entitled, your body belongs to you. And then as children get older and are able to understand more complex topics, you increase their sex education level. And you also, if you have a sex positive mindset, and kids think that they can ask you questions and you don't act like sex is some squeamish, weird thing, they're going to ask you questions and they're going to be curious. And then they're going to grow up thinking sex is a normal part of life instead of this like taboo, bad thing that they need to be all secretive about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And scared, definitely scared. And then honestly, I have a hope, and my hope is that there are going to be a lot fewer people with female bodies who experience pain during sex as sex positivity continues to root itself in to the world, slowly but surely. Well, if you haven't masturbated before, it can be really empowering to first do some research. So like look up like what does the vulva look like, and like follow some cool sex educators like myself, or like people on Instagram and on TikTok are pretty good with the sex education. So start to like surround yourself with sex positive influencers and people who like share sex positive views, so they can start to shift the mindset away from shame. And then if you've never masturbated before and you would like to try, I think the first thing to do is to explore with hands to start, and just like set up a nice, warm, comfortable space for yourself. Put on some sexy music or just some relaxing music, whatever works for you, and just kind of like explore your body, like, and see what feels good to you. And please use lube, for the love of God. There's no such thing as lube. Lube is not bad. Lube should be used for all sex acts, always. That was kind of a little bit off topic on that, but like, like it's about, if you've never masturbated before, it's kind of like undoing the messages of shame, then getting really curious. And then I guess the next phase of that would be to like get yourself a sex toy. Like I think vibrators are so empowering and so good at helping people discover how to experience orgasms if they haven't before. They're literally designed for that purpose. And there are lots of really good, not super expensive options that are made from high quality materials. So that's the next thing. It's like explore with some toys. Like they're literally toys. They're there for fun. It's fun to play.
I was reading a study the other day that said something like as a society, we're becoming more sex positive, especially about sex toys. So like they're becoming more acceptable, less of an embarrassing thing. But at an individual level, there are still things that people have in there that make them feel uncomfortable about them. Do you have any thoughts, or where do these things come from?
I mean, it all comes from this idea of a ton of myths, basically, is kind of, and misinformation is kind of the groundwork that all of the fears about sex toys come from. Because again, sex toys themselves are not inherently shameful or scary. It's because we have decided they are that people are worried about that. So that is the sort of conventional messaging that, like, if you need like all these, there's lots of lies that come out of sex toys, like vibrators are addictive, that they're going to replace your partner, that they're going to make your clit desensitized, like all of these things that are completely false, by the way, that are literally designed to stop people with female bodies from exploring their body and from figuring out how to have pleasure on their own without a partner, because and that's really where the shame comes from. It's like it's this attempt to hold back female sexuality, because like if you know how to make yourself orgasm, you're kind of, the patriarchy then has no footing, because controlling female sexuality is the way that men stay in power.
And do you think,
but I mean, I cannot, but oh, sorry, I was going to finish up there and just say, like, but I do understand why people feel ashamed about them. It's like, if you grow up in a conservative household, you honestly grow up having any experience with the world, you get the messaging that, like, if you want a sex toy, that means your partner can't satisfy you, or you might get addicted to your vibrator, or you're hypersexual. And so the messaging conventionally is like, you're a deranged hypersexual slut.
Yep, pretty much.
If you feel disconnected from your sexual self, it's very context dependent. Obviously, there are going to be so many questions that you want to ask to figure out, like, what it is that has disconnected them. Is this like a trauma? Is this because they're not having the sex they want to have? Is this like a lack of education? Is this shame? Is it a mix of all of these things? Because it easily can be. These things are very complex. That's what I would want to get to the bottom of first. Like, kind of, where is this disconnection coming from? And then to reconnect to your body, a really good place to start is with in coaching, we call it vulva mapping. And in therapy, we call it a clinical mirror exercise. So in vulva mapping, because I think that's actually like a nicer term. I think it's more palatable to me. No, because when I'm talking about my vulva, I don't want to say the word clinical. So
that's
call
true.
me crazy. With vulva mapping, I have clients, not with me, but I explain how to do it, and then they can do it on their own. I usually have my vulva puppet, which I plan to bring in here, and now I can't find it. And I walk them through, like, all the different parts of the labia, all of their parts of their vulva, the labia, the vaginal opening, the clitoris, the clitoral hood, everything. And then I send them a drawing of it as well. And in the instructions, it's like have a warm bath, or like a nice hot shower, whatever, like, makes you feel relaxed. And then, like, actually, like, look at your body in the mirror. And then they use a hand mirror to look at their own vulva and name all of the parts in correspondence with the picture. And I find that can be really eye-opening for people to get more connected with their bodies, because a lot of times, like I said, like, a lot of people who come to my clinic have never even looked at a vulva before, their own vulva. They don't know what they're even looking at. They're like, what are you talking about? So it kind of is starting from square one. And so if you, like, usually experiencing low desire comes from, a lot of times experiencing low desire comes from not having the sex that you want to be having. Like, back to the whole, like, centering or sexuality being centered around penises and being centered around intercourse. So when people think that that's what sex is, and they don't really understand or don't really know anything else, or they think it's the best kind of sex as well, because, like, we have the weird hierarchy of sex where, like, penis and vagina sex is like the very best, when, like, it's actually kind of whatever. It's such a whatever on the list of, like, sex stuff.
Okay.
But like, if you just have penis and vagina sex, there's a very, very, very small chance you're going to have an orgasm from that if you have a vulva. And so you're going to experience low desire and disconnect from your body because you're like, this is kind of shitty. This isn't very good at all. I don't like this. And we're not, as women or as people with clitorises, people raised female, aren't really encouraged to speak about their sexuality or to be open about it or to be curious about it. And so you experience low desire because you don't know how to communicate your needs. You might not even know what they are. And you don't like sex because it's not very good. Porn doesn't pretend to be sex education. There are some like porn doesn't pretend to be sex education. It's like trying to learn sex from watching porn is like trying to learn how to cook by watching Hell's Kitchen. Like it's not like, that's not how real life is.
Okay. Yeah.
But the problem is like, so porn isn't sex education. It doesn't pretend to be sex education. It's movies, but porn has unfortunately become our default sex education because that's the only thing that people see. And it's very damaging. First of all, it's very damaging to people with vulvas and vaginas because we don't know what the fuck is happening and are like, oh my God, like the reverse cowgirl position. That's the best. It's like, definitely not. and then like, oh, I'm supposed to just get off by getting jackhammered by like some guy like with a huge penis. Like, great, awesome. It's like obvious. No, definitely not. I'm going to say not obviously because it's really not obvious. And then it's terrible for men and for male-bodied people too, because then they have all of the wrong information. They learn a lot of like really kind of messed up misogynistic messages about women, and they're often seeing a lot of really intense sex acts that like are not really for beginners. Like you shouldn't just expect anal on a first date. Like it's kind of a process. I mean, some people might be into that. Like you do you. Both people are like, yeah, anal. I'm like, go for it. Live your life. Be careful. But like it's setting these like really weird, unrealistic expectations, and none of it is very pleasurable. I mean, anal can be very pleasurable, but I mean, like the messaging you're getting is like, it's all just, it's ruining everybody in this way.
It goes the wrong way because it's like, this is what should be pleasurable. And then you see that and then you try to do it when it should be the other way around. Like you do things and you decide what's pleasurable for you. And then you do the things that you like.
Exactly true. Yes. And it's a big problem all around. Not even to mention the fact that like it fetishizes people of different races. It fucks people up as far as body image goes because you think you're supposed to have like a very specific body. Anybody who's gender nonconforming is like pretty screwed. And it's like there's a lot of stuff wrong with mainstream porn. That is definitely accurate. Not to mention all the content is stolen on those free sites. Pay for your porn. Pay for your porn.
Exactly.
Do it.
We're gonna make you a poster out of this probably. But yeah, it's true. That's one of the most important things as well. Like part of porn being ethical is paying for it, because and I think this is a widespread practice. And this is another thing. Like people are more likely to go and look for porn than look for a conversation like this one, right? Which is why also porn has become that default sex education, because maybe people haven't been told that there are these type of spaces where they can learn other things, or maybe they just it's easier to find porn, and even like when you go into gaming sites, and you can go to any site and you get ads that are about porn, but you would never get ads about hey, sexual wellness, sex education, this is how your vulva looks like, and this is how it feels, and this is how it should be, and use lube. So that's also part of it.
It's a very tragic reality.
I'd like to talk a little bit about mental health and in relation to sexuality. And I'd like to start by asking about trauma, because you said you are working on that, you're specializing on that. And I think if there is anybody in this moment listening or watching this episode and has been through something, and they're trying to struggle to go back and, regain the power, the control over their sex lives, what would you tell them?
That is sort of the $1 million question. Again, it is like, it is very subjective, and it's going to be based on person to person. But if anybody like who is listening to this has experienced sexual trauma, First of all, trigger warning, obviously, like if you're getting uncomfortable, feel free to turn this off. Sorry, no, that's not good for your listeners, but
no, that's perfect. That's fine.
But basically, like if you've been through a sexual trauma, the first thing to understand is that it is no way your fault. Nothing you did brought it on. You are not to blame in any way. This is not something that should have happened to you. It is extremely messed up. And if you're experiencing problems with sex as a result, these issues are fixable. There are professionals who want to work with you. There is help out there, and you deserve to have a full and beautiful sex life, no matter what has happened to you or where you've been or who you are or where you come from. You deserve to have a beautiful, fulfilling sex life that is pain-free and pleasurable and full of orgasms and everything you wanted and more.
Hell yes. Thank you. How do you think that exploring sexuality and sexual desires can improve mental wellness specifically?
I mean, it helps with so many different things. Like exploring your sexuality is like, as long as if you're not in the asexual community, and you are a person, allosexual person who experiences sexual desire, exploring your sexuality is like, it's like a huge part of coming into your own and understanding who you are, and understanding your place in the world and what you want out of life and what brings you pleasure. Pleasure is such a beautiful thing. And it's so liberating and amazing to experience true, incredible sexual pleasure and orgasms. And like, it helps with everything. Like orgasms help with anxiety. They help with sleep. They help with stress levels. Some studies have suggested they make your skin better. I can personally attest they definitely do. And so they're just all over. Like, it's very empowering. It builds confidence. There's nothing, it's basically the best thing in the world. Like there's nothing it doesn't do that's amazing.
All right.
As far as like it's sexual, as far as like our overall mental well-being, it just it helps you be more confident. It helps you feel more embodied. It helps you feel better about yourself, and it helps you know yourself better. So what could be better?
And then there is this other thing when you talk about mental health and sexuality, which is, the effects that, for example, anxiety, depression, and mental health issues or illnesses in general can have in sexuality. So maybe, do you have any advice for people who are struggling with any mental illness right now and that might be affecting their sexuality?
There's so many different issues that come up when it comes to mental health and sexuality. But first of all, like we'll go with like depression, I guess, is a good example. So like if you have depression and you're experiencing issues with sexual desire, the first thing that people should know is like a lot of times the medication that you're on can really impact your sexual desire. SSRIs have been known libido killers for a very long time, but a lot of the time we give doctors will give people prescribe SSRIs and not bring up the issues with sex at all, not bring up the issues with desire. Even though they are doctors, a lot of doctors are not comfortable talking about sex, so they will not bring it up. In most likeliness, they won't say anything about it. And so it can be quite shocking to find out that like your sex drive is like much lower. So that's the first thing. And then sort of in general, when it comes to exploring sexuality and with mental health, it just has such a variety of like vastly positive mental health benefits. It helps lower anxiety. It helps boost mood. It helps with sleep. And a lot of these issues are combated by mental health issues. So feeling like you can explore your sexuality in different ways can be very beneficial to people who are experiencing mental health problems in general.
Outside of having this kind of conversations like you and I are right now, how can we continue to normalize talking about sex in a shame-free, positive, and healthy way?
First of all, we as individuals, everybody needs to get comfortable with sex themselves and talking about it and trying to undo some of those shame messages, because like the more we talk about it, the more it becomes normalized. So it's like start educating yourself, follow cool sex positive people, like I said before, read cool books about sexuality. You could read my book. It's definitely very empowering. And start talking to your friends about it. Start surrounding yourself with sex positive messages and get yourself out of that headspace, so that out of the shame headspace, so that you can live a more sex positive life and therefore pass on those messages. And then hopefully we'll get the ball rolling and live in a more sex positive world is the goal. It's the goal.
Thank you. And what is something that you think that we need to do differently in the world of sex education?
We need to have it. That'd be really cool. If we could have some of that. I'd love that. I mean, what we need to do is we need to move away from putting more restrictions up and move towards removing the restrictions and having it be a pleasure-based sex education that is comprehensive, that talks about the clitoris and talks about that sex is actually meant to feel good instead of trying to promote all of the dangerous, bad parts of sex. And that's how you do it. That's what we need.
All right. Gigi, thank you so much for being here today with us. So if you want to find Gigi, where can they find you again?
Yeah, you can find me on my website at missgigiengle.com or on Instagram and Twitter at Gigi Engle. And my book, All the Fucking Mistakes, is available on Amazon and where all books are sold.